who are they going to go to for this knowledge and experience? And also the confidence to sit in front of MPs and be grilled. And I can tell you it's not a nice experience.
No. I told them about the story about the chickens, and my goodness, those children will go home, they'll always know how good an OT is and the value that the OT brings, because I love that story. And do you think you lose some of your power and your influence with government because of the way things have changed?
It's gone. It's gone. It's gone because the civil servants don't know who to go to.
Yeah. Kate, thank you so much for coming back to City Matters. You were here before.
Yes, I was.
So first of all, thank you for travelling over.
Not a problem at all. It's always lovely to come to Ireland.
So you came from Stratford-upon-Avon, that's where you live?
Yes, it is.
Very good.
I'm very fortunate to live in a very beautiful town with lots of things going on.
Very good. We'll talk more about that later, because we were chatting a little bit earlier about Stratford, so we'll talk about that later. But for those who don't know you, Kate, you have contributed to the book, and one of the stories in the book, the title of your chapter, The Chicken Run, that story I have told everywhere. I actually told it last week down at the primary school. I was asked to go down because I'm now an author, and on World Book Day they asked me to come down and speak to the kids, and I was talking about both books, and I told them about the story about the chickens, and my goodness, those children will go home, they'll always know how good an OT is and the value that the OT brings, because I love that story. So just for those people who wouldn't know you and who are listening today, just give us a little quick introduction to yourself, because I know you've been an OT for a long time.
Yes, so I've been an OT for 38 years. Still as passionate now as I was when I first started. My career's taken various routes, initially in NHS doing a rotation. Always felt that I would work in mental health. As it turned out, that wasn't the case. I moved to Walthamstow in London when I met my husband. And the only job I could get at that point was in social services. And that's where my passion for housing really embedded in me. Because regardless of what sector you work in as an occupational therapist, people live somewhere, and where they live impacts their health, their well-being, their mental health. So if we can get housing right, it means we can then springboard from that to actual activities that people choose and want to do. So my passion is housing. Yeah. Keep fighting for appropriate housing for people at the right time.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, about, you know, the great achievements you've had, but like take you back. I remember when we were talking about the book, at the very beginning of your career, you went into houses in London, and like they didn't even have indoor plumbing.
I know it seems quite unusual talking about it now, but in that kind of mid-90s, we still had terraced houses in London which had privies, no inside toilets. They tended to have inside water, so they'd have a cold tap, but they wouldn't have hot taps, wouldn't have heating, and literally the privy or the toilet was outside the back door. And, you know, you're only talking, 30 years ago? Yeah. But we had real problems. And it was, somebody reminded me of a story or an intervention I had with somebody in the East End. It's quite a mix of cultures. And at the time there was quite an influx of people from Pakistan. And I was invited out to see this lady who'd just come over as a grandmother to be with her family. And she was having problems getting on and off the toilet. Couldn't understand why, didn't have any physical disability. And I remember going out, so I was probably only, 5 years qualified. And went out, and she was explaining to me how she did it through an interpreter. And it just didn't make sense. So I said, could she show me? And what she was actually doing was she was lifting the seat and she was climbing onto the pan and then squatting on the pan. And that made sense to her, because that's how she went to the toilet in Pakistan. But then you have this dilemma around culture and around appropriate use of equipment and around safety. And I turned to her daughter when we were back in the house and said, have you ever spoken to your mother-in-law about a Western toilet? And she looked at me and went, no. I said, well, I think if you teach her how to use a Western toilet, how we use it, I don't think there'll be a problem. And I explained to her how her mother-in-law was using the toilet. She was mortified. She said, it never crossed my mind, and we will teach her how to use it. And that referral was closed. But it was kind of one of those. I think the thing I learnt most from that is when you're doing assessments, you do need to observe how people do their activities, because we all do things differently. But actually what's important is how that individual does it. Because the way they do it might not be conventional.
That's right. That's very interesting. And also, the cultures, and we've got such a multicultural, just to look at the different cultures and how they do things and interpret it, not to presume everybody understands or does things the same way. That's very interesting. So then you got your passion for housing, and you become heavily involved in that, and you became involved with the specialist section of the Royal College of Occupational Therapy. Tell me a little bit about that, and also talk to me about the fact that that no longer exists and what's going to replace it and how you feel about that.
Oh, controversial. So housing was becoming more of a thing in the early 90s. By the mid-90s, we had the grants becoming available, the disabled facilities grants. And I was working with an amazing OT called Ruth Bull, and she wanted to start a specialist section in housing. So as her kind of junior, we put out a request in Therapy Weekly, which was a kind of magazine at the time, and she started with a number of colleagues the specialist section in housing, and I was involved from the very beginning in a very minor part, and then after our first conference I became secretary. The specialist section in housing has always been really passionate.
Has it been influential?
Incredibly influential. We've got people who people in the past and even now today who have made such a difference. Porrig O'Brien, we've got Ruth Bull who started it. There was Jill Owen-John, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but she did an awful lot as well. And we influence government. We worked our way into the civil servant, trying to work out who we needed to talk to and when we needed to talk to. And it got to the point with the specialist section that if there was something that they needed a comment on, or they wanted evidence for an inquiry, they would come direct to us.
So the government will come direct to you and ask. Very good.
Which is an incredibly powerful position to be in. And it influenced things like the Disabled Facilities Grant. We managed to get gardens, access to gardens into that post. We supported Porrig and his team for the removal of the means testing
for children.
For children. Even probably less than a year ago, we were involved in giving evidence about housing and how the standards of housing don't encourage good inclusive design. So when the Royal College were looking at closing the specialist sections, I think there was a lot of us who were anxious and concerned, because that networking and that kind of recognition doesn't come overnight. And I think, I'm going to be controversial here, the way they've been closed down probably has not been the best way. I think with the new communities, perhaps more of a collaboration and a change over time rather than this sudden stop.
Cut off point.
And what it does is that those people who were engaged and positive and would give huge amounts of time for these inquiries and for writing books and all sorts of things, you lose that goodwill. And, the core people just feel, like they haven't got
Weren't
the energy to,
valued.
not valued, haven't got the energy to start again. And I think it is about value.
And do you think you lose some of your power and your influence with government because of the way things have changed?
It's gone.
It's gone?
It's gone because the civil servants don't know who to go to.
Right.
So, to give you an example, Part M of the building regulations is going to be reviewed. And I was contacted by the civil servants and said, oh, can you represent the Royal College? Well, I can't because there's no specialist section. And it's who do you pass that inquiry on to? Because we can pass it on to the policy officer, but the policy officer doesn't have that in-depth knowledge.
No.
And it's the policy officer, who are they going to go to for this knowledge and experience? And also the confidence to sit in front of MPs and be grilled. And I can tell you it's not a nice experience.
No.
And they've lost that kind of expertise because the specialist section has gone.
Their argument was, that the communities, that it was open to more people, that it was too expensive to be a member of all the different sections, and that people sort of decided, well, I can only be a member of one, so I'll be a member of like posture or seating, and I can't be a member of more than one. I think, is that what you understand to be their argument?
Yeah, I think it was that, and also there was a conversation about out of the members, only 20% were engaging with specialist sections. And I absolutely understand that. I think the problem is, if you look at societies generally, I use Scouts as a wonderful example, having been an Arcala. If you looked at all the people who worked in Scouting, there was only 20% of parents and everybody involved, only 20% were engaged.
Yes.
I think it's just a general thing about society. You'll have those people who are really engaged, and you'll have those that won't. I think my anxiety about the communities is it's going to be more online, and you can't influence as much online. You need those face-to-face conversations with, Alison Dixon, who is an MP, who I collared at a conference last week, talking about Part M. You can't do that online.
I remember in the book, one of your comments was, you never miss an opportunity to have a cup of coffee with an MP or somebody of influence. Any chance you get, sit down with them, because then you build that relationship. I think it's about the relationship you said, I remember in the book, it was so important.
It absolutely is. And speaking to Alison Dixon last week, and I was saying, what's happening about all the research that was done on space standards? And she was going, oh, I didn't know about that. I said, the last government spent £400,000 looking at space standards, and it was never published. I said, that's a waste of public money. Can you find out what's happened? And she goes, oh yeah, give me your email address and I'll find out for you.
Well, I think the section might be going, but you're passionate, and so I think you'll be able to carry on as maybe even independently. Do you think you would be able to provide some of, to be the person that, if they want to interview someone or find out that they know you now, and you might be that person, even though you can't really represent the college?
Yeah. And I think that's it. I will carry on doing that. I'm never going to stop.
No.
Because housing or accessible housing is still my passion. But, if we're building 1.5 million properties across Great Britain, we need them to be accessible.
Yes.
We've got an ageing population, and we've got people who are wheelchair users, who are waiting 10 years for a property. We've got an opportunity now to build properties that actually meet our clients' needs. So I'm never going to stop. No. If I get the opportunity, I will speak to anybody. And I do find having grey hair now works even better, because people just...
They presume that you now have a lot of knowledge, which you did have anyway without the grey hair.
But I think there's a bit more of a deference, so they don't feel like they can fob you off. So I'm going to use my grey hair.
All right, very good. What would you say to current OTs who are thinking about maybe joining the communities of practice or whatever, or maybe have been a wee bit disillusioned by the change? What would you say to those people?
I personally think it's our professional body. If you're not a member, you can't influence. So engage with it. Try and do as much as possible, because our professional body does have standing, and it can get you through into indoors. So we need to be part of the communities. So let's see what it brings.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an exciting new future.
Yeah.
Let's be positive.
You're also the author of one of the Wheelchair Housing Design Guide. Have you other books that you have written?
So I've been involved in a few. So the third edition of the Wheelchair Housing Design Guide, I co-authored with 3 other people. But I've also done chapters for various housing books. So Essential Guide for Occupational Therapists in Housing. So we realised that the undergraduate courses gave very little insight into housing as a subject. So the housing section, well, Ruth Parker, who led it and is the editor, decided let's look at a book that tells people about the legislation, how to do designs. So it was a quick and easy read for new grads.
Good.
So I've been involved in various books along the way,
So I'm going to be interviewing Porrick after you, and he is just doing the Masters. He's not doing it, he's teaching the Masters module in design at Ulster University. So I think that's a first, as far as I know, is it?
Yes,
It's the first in Ulster University anyway.
Yes, certainly in Ulster. There used to be a really good accessible design masters in Salford, but that disappeared, unfortunately. I presume it's just about funding and getting people on it, and getting funding to do masters in the public sector is virtually non-existent now.
So we're going to do a little flip now, Kate, because before we sat down, you told me about some charity work you're doing. Of course, it involves housing, which isn't surprising, but you told me about the charity Alms. Is that right?
So almshouses.
Almshouses.
So
It's very interesting. Tell me what you've just already said off camera.
So it is, Stratford-upon-Avon has municipal charities, and municipal charities were set up in the 16th century, and it was the great and good of Stratford-upon-Avon who gave various sums of money for, and I'm not over keen on the wording, but the poor and destitute of Stratford-upon-Avon.
I'm reading Jane Eyre at the minute, and that just sounds like the poor and destitute.
Yeah. And what they've got is 58 properties around the town centre that they have for the people who are in need of housing. There's a real mixture. There is some that is grade 1 listed, so your typical...
restricted with what you can do with those.
We are. But I think what I personally like about the charity is they really understand that housing has a massive impact on what people can do and what people can do within their lives that bring them meaning. So to give you a lovely example recently of we had a vacancy, we went to visit various people who had applied, and the one that we offered it to was a gentleman who was only 67. He was living in a house of multiple occupation. He had stage 3 bowel cancer. He'd lost his business, his music business, during COVID because of music just died.
Yeah.
And here was a gentleman who had nothing, literally nothing. And when we offered him the property, the joy of him, he said, I have a home that's my own. I've got a home that I can bring my grandson to. I've got somewhere where I can shut my front door and just be me. I know it's going to be warm because we provide heating as part of our rent. And I know that I'm going to have Wi-Fi. I can be connected. But he said, most importantly, it's a home of my own and I can never be kicked out. And he said, you don't understand how powerful that is to enable me to move forward with my life. And this is just a home.
No, we take a lot for granted. Someone like us that have always had a home
Yeah.
But, I understand it because I do a bit of voluntary work in prisons, and many of the prisoners are put out into hostels.
Yeah.
And they don't have their own front door. They don't have any control over anything. And it just is a vicious circle. They end up back in prison. And I believe housing would be one of the solutions as well to that, providing them with somewhere where they can have privacy, they can build their life.
Yeah. It's that my own front door that you can choose who and who doesn't come into your home. And he was saying, I could go to the bathroom now and I don't know who I'm going to come across. And he said the thought of being able to actually go into a bathroom that I know is clean, I can deal with my colostomy and I don't have to have any problems with that. He says I don't have to clean it before I actually do my colostomy care. And you just think, that is so important. And I think for me what really got me was I'm going to be able to have my grandson come round. And he said, that's good for me, it's good for my daughter. And he said, and I've got another one on the way and I want to be involved in their life as well.
Yeah. Very good. So the charity provides the housing and they pay rent probably out of benefits or whatever way they can afford?
Yeah, most of our tenants are on housing benefit, but we're a little bit, because we're quite it's not wealthy, but it's in good shape financially. That's
what the charity is.
The charity.
Yeah.
So that's why we can provide heating and we can provide free Wi-Fi and we can provide free telephone lines. Because those are the value-added bits that make a real difference. But also we look after our homes really well.
Yeah. And what's your role on the charity? You're a trustee?
So I'm a trustee, which means it's looking at governance, it's being a critical friend to the management team. It is assisting with recommending new residents. Last night we were looking at who we're going to fund, so we have this lovely charity pot that we can give out every year because we have income from other properties within Stratford-upon-Avon and some endowments that we can work from. So last night we were going, well, we've got this money, can we give something to the Citizens Advice? Can we give something to a homeless group? Can we give money to a church fund? So we gave money to the food bank, all these charities we can support. So we make those decisions based on the evidence we've got from those organisations.
And those charities you mentioned are all supporting the residents as well, like the food bank, Citizens Advice. They are all feeding into...
So they can help our residents, but we have a wider remit with supporting everybody.
Yeah. It's not just for the residents. Yeah.
As long as they live in Stratford-upon-Avon. So every year we support the Santa Run, which is they go and see families who've got limited resources, and we provide £150 Tesco vouchers for those families so they can have a nice Christmas day.
Very good. So who funds the charity? Where do they get the money from this charity?
So because the money that was given to them in the 16th century, that was invested. So you can imagine £5-10 in 16th century now works out at quite a significant sum. We also own quite a lot of land in Stratford-upon-Avon, which gives us rent. So we support ourselves through these permanent endowments.
You were saying earlier that some of the requirements for getting a house can be quite archaic.
Yeah.
And that might be something you'd work on, is it?
It's something we definitely need to work on. So, for example, 8 of our properties, you have to be women, you have to have a Christian faith, but you can't be divorced because it was set up by 2 spinsters who had very traditional views.
Which would have been common then and normal then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we need to be a little bit more flexible, and we have to go through a process with the Charity Commission to change that.
Because you said that's part of the endowment that they left.
Yeah. So we have to be sensitive to what they said, but also look at modern day, and you know, the 16th century and the 21st century are very different, and we need to look at that. So the other place that we have is that married couples couldn't live together. So you'd have husbands upstairs in a bedsit, and you'd have the wife downstairs in a bedsit. Again, it's just about having the time to work with the Charity Commission to change those endowments.
Yeah. Kate, you're obviously really busy because you talked a lot about housing and your input and your whole passion around that, and you've talked about your charity work. But what else are you doing at the minute?
So I'm kind of gone on to the next section of my career. I've sold my company. I'm working as a sole trader, but working with people who I've worked with a long time. So I'm going to continue working with Stana, which is a company that provides stair lifts and lifts, and I've been involved in their new home lift, which we launched at the OT show, but we are actually in the Ideal Home Show house. So we've got that coming up. I love working with that company. It's a family-based business. I've worked with the 4th, 5th and now 6th generation Stanners, and I've worked with them for 26 years. And although I'm a consultant, I really feel part of the team. So I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to do a little bit more mentoring of people going into private practice. For me, that's kind of my passion. Let's give something back. So I've got 3 people who I'm now working with into private practice, and that's around not only their OT input, but how to run a business. Because I think what we do lack in our undergraduate training is understanding of business. And you probably understand this. I learnt as I went along.
Yes.
I didn't have any formal training. It was, I wouldn't say trial and error, but it was a bit. So I want to give them that kind of firm foundations for a business, how you can grow it, develop it. It's about finance, it's about marketing, it's about all those things that make a really good business.
Well, that is so good, because there are lots of OTs are going to be listening to this podcast, and I know from a little bit of a survey we've done over recently is that a lot of people may be looking for a change, a little bit disillusioned, or maybe they just want to dip their toe into private practice. And you've said in the book already, you know, you can have a portfolio career, you can have a little bit of NHS, a little bit of social services, and you can still, so it's good that you're there and that you're able to give them some direction and some advice. I think that's a valuable thing that you're doing. So I'm sure there'll be loads of people will be ringing you when this podcast goes out. I hope so.
I think it's because I don't want people to make, I wouldn't say made massive mistakes, but I want people to understand what you need to have in place to have a really firm base for your business to grow.
And they need confidence to step out and go into private practice. Even still, like I know we started like many years ago, you and I, but even now they still need that bit of a nudge to say you can do this, and you know, so that's really, really good. Yeah. So before we finish, there's 2 things I wanted, or maybe 3 more things I want to say. First of all, could you tell us the story again about the chickens? Because I have told it, as I said earlier, so many times, and it just is such a really good story. And it just really does emphasise the value of occupational therapy and really getting to the real need of the patient. So tell us that story.
So this is a client who I got to know just post-pandemic. She'd been involved in a road traffic accident. She was a teacher and had gone to, on her last day of the summer holidays, decided to have coffee and cake in a farm shop. Unfortunately, a 97-year-old lady mistook her accelerator and her brake and ploughed into 5 people, resulting in my client having a spinal injury. She went to a spinal injury unit, and at that time nobody was allowed to visit. It was really difficult to kind of work out how we were going to get her home. I managed to get permission from the senior management to go in. I went in to see her, and she was in this 6-bedded unit, and I went up to her and I was sat next to her. She was in bed, And I introduced myself and I just said, what do you want to do? And at that point, she burst into tears. I'll never forget it, because she said, you were the first person who's asked me what I want. Not what they want, but what I want. So we had a bit of laugh, and I said, so what do you want to do? And she said, I want to feed my chickens and go back to work, but feed the chickens was the most important thing. And in that conversation of talking about chickens, she told me she rescued chickens that had been battery farmed, and then she'd bring them back to life, as she called it. And for her, it was really important. She said, I can go and talk to my chickens after I've had a bad day at work. They sit on my lap, I can stroke them. She said it's the most beautiful thing to do. So I said, okay, let's get you home to be able to look after your chickens. We do need to make sure there's somewhere for you to stay in your own home, and there's somewhere for you to wash and dress, but the main priority is your chickens. So we worked on getting her home, and then when she was discharged, she came home, and the first thing she did was go down the path to the chicken coop, and she sat there in her wheelchair, and myself and her husband backed off, and these chickens came out and they jumped on her lap. And the joy in her face, I cannot describe, because to her that was the most important thing. Not that she could get in and out of bed, not that she could shower, it was that she could be with her chickens. And then over a period of time we worked out you could get automatic chicken coop openers and videos so you could watch your chickens. So she... and they come in the evening, she'd put down the door to save them from the foxes. And to this day, she says that was the best thing for her. And I think what it made me think is, as OTs, we really do need to ask what is important to the individual, not what necessarily is important to who's employing us, which for the NHS was how quickly can we get somebody out. But actually what's important, because we did get her out quickly, because she wanted to see her chickens. She wanted to see her chickens. And actually the cost of doing that, I know it was a medical legal claim, but it was under £1,000 to put in a pathway. And you just think the impact that had on her was phenomenal.
And she said that she probably wouldn't have wanted to leave hospital had she not been able... No, she wouldn't have been as motivated to get out of hospital had she not been able to look after her chickens.
Yeah, she was depressed. Nobody was thinking about her as an individual anymore.
No.
She was in her wheelchair, and it was about hoisting, manual handling. It was about bowel management. It was about washing and dressing. Nobody ever asked her what she wanted to do.
No. When I told the story at the OT show, I ended that story by telling them about the film, The Bucket List, that I had watched on an airplane just a few weeks before. And the bucket list, it was Morgan Freeman, and I forget the other guy's name, but he said to him, when you reach the pearly gates, he said, there's only 2 questions you're going to be asked. And the other guy says, and what are the 2 questions? And he says, number 1, did you find joy in your life? And number 2, did you bring joy to others? And when I read that story about the chicken, I thought, well, that definitely brought joy to you because you could see her, and that was such a joyous thing. But it brought joy to her because she said when she stroked the chickens, her blood pressure came down, she felt... and so definitely as OTs, we have achieved that by being able to bring joy to others and bring joy, first to ourselves, which is really important. You have to enjoy what you do and you have to find joy in your work, and then to bring that joy to others. So I used your story as an example of that. So it's very good. So I'm going to finish off. What has OT given you? What have you got from occupational therapy from the last 37 years?
Well, I think what you said, joy. My husband describes me as a bit like a Tigger, because I get up in the morning and I'm full of joy and I'm bouncing around because I know what I do has an impact. It might be providing access to a chicken coop, but it might be for working with a young girl and actually getting her seated properly so she can actually do the help kind of, I'm just thinking of a client, help prepare dinner with her mum and dad. Very limited, but it's still really important to her, and the smile on somebody's face. So I think from a client perspective, it's bringing them joy. From a personal perspective, I have met some amazing people and have got these strong friendships who I know I can contact if I need anything OT-wise, and probably personally.
Yeah.
And those people have had a massive impact on my life, and I've been so fortunate to meet people. But also I think OT can lead you in so many directions. And for me, if you'd asked me when I was 20 what I would be doing, I would have never been able to describe what I was doing. And it's given me the opportunity to take opportunities. Never say no, even if you think slightly panicked, I don't know whether I can do this. It's just take it, run with it, use your OT process, and you can achieve so much. And I feel so fortunate to have had a career, but also a profession that really has an impact on individuals.
I think, and I've said this a few times, maybe even in the book, I don't know, but I think we appreciate it more when we get older and realise what we've had and the profession we've had. And the purpose then of the book and the podcast is to get that belief in people at an earlier stage in their career. You might have had it from a very young age. I was quite passionate, but not everybody maybe finds their passion. So maybe this is going to help them, really appreciate that they have their hands on a profession that can change people's lives, including their own. So my last question is, you talked about, when I was 20, I didn't know where it was taking me. What would you say now to your 20-year-old self?
Take every opportunity you get. Speak to everybody. Make friends with people who have influence. And be proud of what occupational therapy can do. And if that involves some more detailed conversations with people, don't stop. Just keep going. And I think sometimes by telling stories like the chicken story or any other story, it makes it personal to somebody who doesn't understand occupational therapy. But never stop networking. Speak to people. I've had OTs, so somebody recently who's in second year at Worcester contacted me about housing. And she said, well, you said in your address to our final conference to make contact with people. And she says, so I'm making contact with you. This is what I'd like to do. What's your thoughts? And to me, that is amazing. That's what we need to do. Make those connections, because you never know where it's going to take you.
No. And we're finishing off, and we haven't even mentioned the fact that you're a fellow of the Royal College, that you're also a fellow of, you mentioned the university there, Worcester?
Worcester, yeah.
So is that where you trained?
It's not.
It's not where you trained, but they have honoured you with a fellowship.
Yes, I think it's because when they first started, they were a university that didn't have NHS funding. So it was the first course that had no, people were taking out their own finances to fund their course. And I worked with Yvonne and did some training for them and teaching for them. So I think it came from there.
All right. That's very good. And isn't it nice to be honoured and, for the work that you've done? So that was the fellowship of the college and of the university.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of that.
So, Kate, I want to thank you so much. I've enjoyed the conversation. And as always, you've encouraged me to keep going, and you've given me that little lift and that passion, as you always do. So thank you very much, Kate. Lovely.
Thank you.